Shalom, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the social aspect of reincarnation with Dr. Jonnie Schnytzer. We are thrilled to be learning with you in the new year. Hope everyone had a nice Rosh Hashanah, Shana Tova. Dr. Schnytzer is a regular here at VBM. He's taught with us many times, and we're very happy to have him again. I will copy and paste his bio in the chat for anyone who would like to read it in case you're learning with him for the first time. And I will pass things over to him. Thank you so much for being with us again.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alex. Shana Tova to everyone. It's wonderful to be here again. So we're here to talk about the social aspect of reincarnation. Sort of what does this mean? So I want to give a bit of a background. So I teach, I lecture medieval Kabbalah, and I think I've been researching reincarnation on the Jewish bookshelf for at least a decade. It never ends. There's always more. But this while this lesson is going to be based on kabbalistic texts, it's inspired by real life events. Now, I know what that sounds like. I don't mean, you could take it however you mean. This isn't based on real life reincarnations, but it's based on things that have happened that have made me question certain aspects of reincarnation that beforehand I didn't really think of. What do I mean? So, story number one. The year is 1989. I'm 6 or 7 years old, and we're living in Israel. And my parents, you know how there are these memories that stick. You don't know why, but they stick in your mind. And I remember my parents, it's a vivid memory. They told us we're going to live in Chicago for a year. And, I was 6 or 7 living in Israel. Chicago sounds foreign. I remember my first concern, I was very upset because I was like, wow, we're going to go live for a year in a place where they don't speak English. And I was very upset by this and worried. And I remember my parents calmed me down. They said, no, Chicago, it's in America. They speak English like we speak. And that sort of calmed me down. So we spent a year in Chicago. This is 1989. We're going to skip now to 2005. 2005, I've just finished my duty 3 years in the Israeli Navy. And as a kind of bonus, as I'd finished, I was able to try out for summer camps, Jewish summer camps in America. And the way it works is the Jewish agency has these tryouts. You go, you try out, you either get in or you don't. They ask you a bunch of questions, and at the end they tell you this is where you're going. You don't have much of a choice. And of all the places on the map, where do I get selected? Not Chicago, Wisconsin, Eagle River. Some little, place. For me, it was like middle of nowhere. But interestingly, or perhaps serendipitously, all of the campers and the staff came from Chicago. And I remember thinking at the time, oh, that's cool, because, I'd been to Chicago once, and so after the 2 months in summer camp, I then spent some time in Chicago. And even though I couldn't remember anything, it was just, it was a nice experience. Okay, that was 2005, just finished the military. So, I was 22, something like that. We now, at the time, one of the people that I made very close ties to was in charge of the program. And so we became close, 2005. 10 years later, 2015, I'm already working at Birthright. I'm advisor to the CEO. And I get an email from this lovely lady saying, guess what? I've been able to organize the first ever special needs Birthright trip. We're coming to Israel. And I'm like, wow, this is going to be amazing. We're going to get to meet. And, it was lovely. Okay. Final story is this personal introduction. The year is 2024. I'm already, I have my doctorate, medieval Kabbalah. I'm researching, teaching, focusing on reincarnation. And I get invited in a very odd kind of constellation I won't get into. I get invited to give a talk at a conference at Northwestern University in Chicago. So again, Chicago appears in my life, and I'm thinking to myself, this is by the fourth time or the third time I get to Chicago and I get to see the same people I've been seeing for, over a decade, start asking myself, could it be that I have some odd connection with Chicago or people in Chicago? And I start asking myself this seriously, because what are the odds? And so this is the inspiration for this talk, because I hadn't really thought of this idea beforehand. The kind of what are the social ramifications once we accept the idea that if we accept the idea that there is reincarnation. Now, just to be clear, right? Like, I don't know how much anyone in the room here knows about reincarnation or reincarnation in Judaism. Maybe if we could have like a virtual raise of hands, like if you feel you need a nutshell background. Just raise your hand if you feel you need a bit of a background. If you don't, we're just gonna go right into our text. But if you feel you need something, I'll give a bit of a. I see here. What do I have in the chat? One moment. Okay, so I'll give just a little bit of a background. So what do we know? Long story short, until the 13th century, Judaism has pretty much nothing to say about reincarnation. When I say pretty much, that's not to say nothing, but it's to say that for a very long time, we don't really know, we don't know anything. So until the 13th century, 1300, Spain, Judaism either has nothing to say about reincarnation, and if it does, 10th century, we have a very prominent rabbi, Rabbi Sadia Gaon, who says, guess what? There are these people that call themselves Jews, and God forbid they believe that the soul can come back, like after they've died. And even worse, they even believe that you can be reincarnated into an animal. So it's very derogatory. But by the 13th century, once kabbalistic literature begins to flourish, to crystallize, we have text upon text that start advocating and explaining that the soul can be reincarnated into the inanimate, into flora, into fauna, into anything and everything. So it becomes a thing in the 13th century. And I want us to begin looking at one text, one very fascinating text that begins to think about potentially the kind of thinking of souls as a family, starting to think about, is there some connection between the people in our lives and perhaps our primordial beginnings? Okay? So let's look at our first text here. So we all know about the tree of life, or we've heard about the tree of life. This is a kabbalistic field trip. It's this idea that right, the way you can have a transcendental God, the way you can have a God with an inscrutable will that's unexplainable, that's beyond existence, and yet also have a God that is watching over the world, you have emanation. And the way Kabbalists would discuss these two aspects, fundamental aspects of the Godhead, the God that is beyond the world and God that is watching over the world, you have the tree of life. And at the very top, or perhaps bottom of the tree of life, we have the roots of existence. We're still talking just about the Godhead. And then it becomes life. Now, as we're about to see, a fascinating move Kabbalists make between envisioning God is connecting between God, the Godhead, the very beginning of existence, and a cluster of an infinite amount of souls that are all kind of stuck together in this tree of life. Now, we're reading now a text of a 13th century Kabbalist by the name of Rabbi Joseph. He was nicknamed Rabbi Joseph of Hamadan. Hamadan is, Persia. Perhaps he came from Persia or perhaps, his family were immigrants, but seems to have perhaps been an immigrant Kabbalist coming perhaps from the Middle East and finds himself in Spain. And here's what he writes. Know that every family of Israel is a tree in the Garden of Eden. Now, he's talking about literal families, like, right, we have the Schnytzer family, we have the Nitz family, the Zimmerman family. He's talking about families. Every family of Israel is a tree in the Garden of Eden, and it is a branch of the tree of life. Now, let's just stop here for a moment, because this is a beautiful picture. What the Kabbalist here wants us to envision or think about, every so often we think about the Garden of Eden. And the Kabbalist is saying to us, so whatever you think about the Garden of Eden, this primordial place, this place that even though it was primordial, perhaps in some form or matter, it still exists. In primordial Garden of Eden, there are many trees. It's a beautiful place, this huge spiritual central park. And every tree is not just a tree. It's not just an aspect of God, the Godhead. Each tree is actually ontologically really connected to the families today. These are the roots. This is the very beginning of the show. And what we have today are the branches. And it is another matter within the chariot. Now, when a Kabbalist says chariot, don't get scared. It's code word for God. It's code word for trying to create the infinitesimal jigsaw puzzle of God, bringing all the mosaics together. Chariot is code word for God. So what we're being told here is that God and all the families of souls, which are represented by actual families of the Jewish people today, are intertwined with God. Right? Whatever that means. We'll put that aside for a moment, because we're here to deal with the social aspects of reincarnation. For every family is a single entity, and therefore the Torah says, parents shall not be put to death for the children, nor children by parents, right? There's an actual law that, you're responsible for yourself. It's not possible that your parents did something wrong, and as a result, you're going to pay, and go down death row. That doesn't make sense. Every family is a single entity, and therefore the Torah says, parents shall not be put to death for children, for they are all one limb. Thus, if one of the brothers dies, his other brother remains to sustain him and strengthen him, giving vitality to that severed branch. But if one falls and there is no second to raise him, then that tree in the Garden of Eden is cut down, and that branch from the tree of life is severed, and that limb is not recognized in the chariot. So let's explain, because this is complicated. Supposedly. So our Kabbalist is now shifting to another famous commandment, the commandment of Yibum. What's Yibum? You have a brother that marries a woman, Mazel Tov, the brother then dies. If there were no children, so there is nothing in the world that kind of can continue the brother's image. If there's a living brother, there is a positive commandment for the brother to marry the deceased brother's wife. Why? So that, Kabbalistically, child can be born, and the soul of that child will be the soul of the deceased brother. And therefore, if you imagine this tree we're talking about in the Garden of Eden, this tree will not lose a branch. But if the brother does not marry you, if it doesn't happen, a branch falls off. It's like a sand clock. It's this tragic, it's a very dramatic picture. One member goes, another member goes, branches are falling in winter. It's a very dreary picture. So there's this idea, pruvu, let's be sustainable. You need to, it's all about, this is the Kabbalistic explanation for why bringing kids is important and why you need to multiply and so on and so forth. Okay. We continue. Therefore, if one of the brothers dies, as I just mentioned, and his wife falls to a Levirate marriage before his brother, he, the surviving brother, sustains the nature and causes that branch cut off from the tree in the Garden of Eden, which is the family itself, to grow again. So it's miraculous. The brother dies, a branch falls, but if then the living brother marries the wife, child is born, all of a sudden the branch regrows. You know what it reminds me of? It's like, in Back to the Future, the picture of Marty that's disappearing. And based on what you do in life, the mitzvah that you keep, Marty reappears or God forbid, he's going to disappear. This is mamash. This is where Back to the Future comes from. It's from a medieval kabbalistic teaching. Now he continues. For the dead of every family of Israel are as the roots of the tree. This is beautiful. The dead of every family of Israel are as the roots of the tree, and the living are the branches. For by the merit of the dead, the living endure. This is so powerful. Imagine the Holocaust. You have entire families that have gone, people that you know that have lost so much, and there is so much comfort in this teaching because we are told, guess what? You're a branch in this tree, and do you know what sustains you? Do you know why you are who you are? Do you know why you get to continue and you have a life? Because of your roots. They're never gone. They're always here with us. So it's this very powerful, beautiful idea of a dynamic tree, the Garden of Eden, which is full of these trees that are dynamically changing based on what's going on in our lives and what we're doing. Now, I haven't been able to find another teaching. The truth is, I have to be honest, I didn't find this. This is Professor Gershom Scholem, right, renowned scholar of Kabbalah. He wrote a chapter. He was one of the first to really elaborate about reincarnation in Kabbalah. And he has this one paragraph in this long chapter which deals with reincarnation, and he's interested in a whole lot of other stuff, but he has one beautiful paragraph where he gets into this idea of the social aspect, and like he just drops this bomb and just moves on. And so the three sources I'm about to bring, the fundamental sources, are all Gershom Scholem found them. He tied them together beautifully, but it didn't become a thing. And so when you read this chapter, you say, wow, so if you're interested, if you look in the English translation, this book is on the mystical shape of the Godhead. It's a Shoken publication. It's been, been published, republished numerous times. And there's a chapter there on reincarnation. And there's one page, even half a page, that deals with this aspect. So this is where it comes from. Now, what I began saying is in the 13th century, I'm simply not aware of another text that deals with reincarnation that is thinking socially about it. This text is profound. Rabbi Joseph Abba Mishushan Hamadan, in that he really is thinking about the social aspect of reincarnation. And you know what? Now that I think about it, it's fascinating that if he was an immigrant, and perhaps coming from a family that was detached from its past, whether there's a connection between migration, Jews migrating, losing a land from afar, coming to a new land, it's scary. And what inspires these kind of visions? So, right, we're trying to weave in sort of what goes on in someone's life and the sort of the writings that Kabbalists write about. So this is our first text. And Gershom Scholem identified this really as the starting point of this idea of the social aspect. Okay, and we're still just in a Kabbalistic text. We haven't taken it to what does it mean for us when we see friends and family. Okay. Now that was the 13th century. In the 13th century, you have for the first time, as I said, reincarnation becomes kosher. It already becomes a thing on the Jewish bookshelf. What does reincarnation look like in the 13th century? It's not dominant, but when it appears, it comes to explain, it pretty much comes in two forms. One form is if you misbehave, you're going to be reincarnated into an animal as a way of keeping Jews in check and keeping the commandments. So reincarnation can either appear sort of in a fearful aspect, right? Purgatory, you don't want to go down that road, so be safe, be good. But there's another aspect that I've taught of here in the past, which sort of views the world and creation in the eyes of awe. Think of Avraham, Yoshua, Joshua, Heschel. Everything's amazing, everything's awesome, and everything's living and vibrant. Think vibrant matter. And this other aspect in the 13th century views the entire creation through the prism of reincarnation, that everything around us is coming and going constantly. And yet, in the 13th century, that's pretty much it. We're not getting into explaining the Bible according to reincarnation. We're not really delving deeper into the social aspects. And if we are, it's literally a paragraph. Let's skip 300 years. We're in the 16th century in Tzfat, which is the second period in which Kabbalah will be crystallized and will flourish again, right? We're talking quite a while after the Spanish Inquisition. Jews are kicked out of Portugal. A lot has happened. And we have figures like Rabbi Isaac Luria and Rabbi Chaim Vital. And it's in the 16th century, for the first time, we will have a book that is written that is solely about reincarnation. It's called Shara Gilgulim, the gates of reincarnation. It's a huge book when you think about, like 100, 200 pages dedicated to reincarnation. Until the 16th century, it's a thing, it's kosher, but it's 16th century that it becomes, okay, this has to be, this is a doctrine in itself. Now, all of a sudden, Tzfat, this tiny little town on this, mountain, nested in this mountain in the upper Galilee of Israel, you have Kabbalists walking around that are viewing existence through the prism of reincarnation. And it is so powerful that they begin to view the Bible as one big reincarnation story. What do I mean? So one day, Moses meets Jethro. And the relationship between the two, I don't know if you ever noticed, is very odd. Because Moses happens to stumble across Jethro, marries his daughter, he then comes to save the Israelites. Then, right, you would have thought that once you're like God's first-hand man and you're taking the Israelites through the desert, you're not going to have time for your father-in-law. But guess what he does? He meets his father-in-law again, and his father-in-law gives him one of the biggest judicial advices ever that makes the Torah more manageable. Now, something very odd happens, because in this final moment where Moses is about to say goodbye to Jethro, after the second time they meet, and he's with the Israelites, he's a big leader, he says to his father-in-law, look, you've helped us so much, come with us. I need you. Come with me. And Jethro, as we say in Australian, basically just buggers off. He just disappears. If you literally read the text, it makes no sense at best. At worst, it's chilling. It's like literally, Moses has this heartfelt speech, come on, come with us, it'll be amazing. And Jethro just disappears. Closed curtain, done. Forever with this character. And you say to yourself, what? That's it? Like, what just happened here? And Rabbi Isaac Luria will say, you see, the only way to understand what really is going on here is to understand who is the reincarnation of Moses and who's the reincarnation of Jethro. What are their origins? You see, there's this idea, and it goes back to the tree of life. We said that the tree of life is the Godhead, and it's intertwined with the Jewish people. How can you intertwine the Jewish people with the Godhead and the tree of life? Think Garden of Eden. Adam. In the beginning, all there was in the world was Adam. And when you think of Adam, think of the tree of life in the shape of a human being, and he encapsulates billions upon billions clusters of souls of the Jewish people. And the moment he sins, boom, they go flying all over the place. What's the purpose of existence? It's like when one of your kids takes, throws something with tiny balls, they go all over the living room table, the carpet, you got to go pick them up. That's life. That's sort of history. You're picking up all those little pieces your kids dropped, and you're putting them back together. And Rabbi Isaac Luria then says that from here comes the family of the Jewish people and they scatter. Now, if we look at the biblical story, what is the very beginning of Moses and Jethro? How can we understand this perplexing relationship where Jethro helps Moses, he then disappears? Cain and Abel. Rabbi Isaac Luria tells us, you want to know who Moses and Jethro really are? They're the reenactment and the fix of the Cain and Abel story. So you have two brothers. They each give a sacrifice to God. We don't really know what goes on there, but God accepts one sacrifice, he accepts Abel's sacrifice, doesn't accept Cain's sacrifice. What does Cain go do? He kills his brother. There are many different interpretations for why and what. Rabbi Isaac Luria will say, so we have here karma is a problem, right? So it's got to be fixed. So Cain has to now do a favor for Abel. They got to fix something. Who's Abel? Moses, the good guy. Moses is Abel. Who is Cain? Or who is Jethro? Cain. So Moses isn't really Moses. Moses is a cloak for Abel. Moses is a fix for Abel. Jethro isn't Jethro. Jethro is a cloak. It's that lovely new Gucci coat you bought for winter. That's Jethro. It's a second chance at fixing Cain. And when Cain comes to Abel the second time, when Jethro comes to Moses and gives him his wife and gives him advice on how to judge the Israelites, that's Cain fixing, killing his brother. And what's going on in the 16th century in Sfat is this is not one of the ways to understand the Bible. This is the only way to understand the Bible. It's the way to understand Bilam. It's the way to understand Lavan. It's the way to understand Jacob and Esau. And they take this all the way to Rabbi Akiva, to all of your favorite rabbis in the Talmud. They're all intertwined with this. So it becomes this cosmic drama with giving and taking, pluses and minuses, calm as a challenge, calm as a problem, and the rest is history. Reincarnation by the 16th century becomes a social revolution. Because what happens next? What do you think happens when Jews go to shul and you're being taught Bible through the prism of reincarnation? What's the purpose of teaching Torah, right? You hear a sermon on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, or Shabbos. What's the purpose of the sermon, right? The Torah is meant to be eternal, so you hear a sermon, you hear a nice drasha, it's meant to be applicable to your lives. So I have a question for you. If in the 16th century, you go on a Friday night, and you hear a drasha about how Moses isn't Moses, Jethro isn't Jethro, it's actually Cain and Abel fixing, and you go home and you tell your spouse this story or your kids, what do you start thinking about? Who's my wife? Who are my kids? It's not who you thought they were. Right? Get real. This is the stakes suddenly become cosmic. You have a family, the specific family you have for a certain reason. You're adopted, there's a reason. You have this loving grandmother that raised you. You never understood why. There's a reason. That's what they begin teaching in 16th century Tzfat. And Gershom Scholem didn't really elaborate on this idea. But I find it hard to believe he didn't see the connection, knowing that he found all of these bits, that it starts with Yosef Hamadan. It starts with that beautiful passage that sees the tree of life as living, breathing families, that their roots are the deceased. And that tells you that the reason you have to keep certain commandments has to do with what you owe your family. Your family being not only the family of this generation, but of previous ones that continue to live in this one. So we have here this beautiful cycle where the roots all of a sudden become the branches. All of a sudden, we're not sure what's the past and what's the future. Once you adopt this vision of we go back to the Garden of Eden and this tree where the roots are the deceased and the branches are the living, but once you tell me that if you marry the deceased brother's wife and they have a child and the branch regrows, then the root becomes the branch. It becomes completely cyclical. What happens to these kabbalists when they have these teachings? So I mentioned the first book that was written on dedicated to reincarnation, The Gates of Reincarnation. So according to the legend, it's written by the prized pupil of Rabbi Isaac Luria, who dies at the age of 37. He comes from Egypt to Tzfat. He's only there for 2 years, but his prized pupil becomes Rabbi Chaim Vital. So Rabbi Chaim Vital writes The Gates of Reincarnation, and he claims he gets this from his teacher. I want to read a short passage because it's very telling of the self-awareness of Rabbi Chaim Vital. In the middle of the book, this is what he tells us. And this is the book that tells you who's reincarnated to who in the Bible, how it works, when you become a porcupine, when you become a bat, and so on and so forth. These are the words of my master, Rabbi Isaac Luria, of blessed memory, spoke to me, concerning myself and the root of my soul. Right? This is what the guy is teaching. He's not teaching you, how to build a sukkah, or he is, but he's teaching you the root of your soul. On Rosh Chodesh Adar, on the 1st of Adar, when we have Purim, in the year 1571, he told me that while he was in Egypt, he began to attain his spiritual insight. And there it was said to him that he should come to the city of Tzfat, may it be built and established, for there I, Chaim, dwelled, in order that he may teach me. This is wild. You have here Rabbi Chaim Vital, who in his consciousness, as far as he's concerned, the sole purpose of the existence of Rabbi Isaac Luria is so that Rabbi Chaim Vital can be taught by him for these 2 years while he's in Tzfat, and he can spread his teachings in the world. So you see there is this very deep connection between what the disciple is being taught about his own life, and it's like this chicken and egg. What came first? The way you gave a deeper meaning to the biblical stories, to reincarnation, or how you understood your own life. But this is what's going on in Tzfat. Rabbi Chaim Vital is walking around with the Ari. They're going all over Tzfat, and one day they see a stone, and he says, I'm going to tell you who's in that stone. He sees something else, I tell you who that guy is, and so on and so forth. What else is going on in Tzfat? Alongside a deeper teachings into understanding the Bible according to reincarnation, if you like, one big happy or one big dysfunctional family, you have the development of the 13th century idea we read about the tree of life. As you recall, that 13th century teaching was cryptic. I had to sort of, you have to bring stuff out of it, but it's the beginning of something. But notice then what happens to it in the 16th century alongside what's going on with Rabbi Isaac Luria and Rabbi Chaim Vital. We have another big, right, Rabbi Moses Cordovero, one of the big giants in Sfat at the time. He writes probably more than more Kabbalists ever wrote. In his book Shiur Koma, he writes the following. So there's Sefer Toldot Adam. We're told in Genesis this is the book of generations of man, and there's this whole big question: what does the Bible mean in Genesis when it says this is the book of the generations of man? What are we talking? Chronology, history? What's going on here? How does Cordovero understand this? The chain of the unfolding of souls in their families and their generations. That is to say, they are species upon species, communities upon communities. It's actually, it's a wrong translation. Now I look at it, it shouldn't be species upon species, it's races upon races. So what is Cordovero saying? How does he understand when it says in Genesis, this is the book of the generations of man, he says, I understand it literally. First, Adam was given this book, and in this book was the family tree, what some of us have, the genealogy of all Israel for always. And if you were to open up that book, you would see how certain families go through Spain to China, some others go to Japan, some others go to Machu Picchu, some others go to Israel, and so on and so forth. And Cordovero says everything is claimed. Everything needs to be restored, but he says, make no mistake, this beautiful idea of family trees in Eden, by the 16th century, gain a historic aspect. We're talking about a generation that their fathers and fathers and fathers and fathers were banished from Portugal and Spain. And they're asking themselves, what happened to our families? Right? This is like Holocaust. This is simply human tragedy. You're detached from your past. You don't know what to do. And what's the response here? It's all okay. You have this big book that Adam was given, and that's our insurance policy. It's that even though I today am living in Tzfat, 16th century, I'm actually part of a family that has in it Portuguese, Spaniards, Babylonians, right? And it's got everything. It's got races. It's got literal communities. If you're living in Arizona, there's a reason why you're there. There are certain souls. According to this teaching, the logic of this teaching, I'm now bringing this home. The logic of this teaching says, unless we didn't understand this, that not only is there a reason why your nuclear family is who they are, because you're meant to fix things from previous reincarnations, but the community that you're part of in Arizona, there is a reason why you're there. You sometimes ask yourself, why did I get to Chicago? Why am I living in Ra'anana? Why was I born in Brisbane? And Cordovero says, everything is accounted for. The community you're in, your race, the generations of your family, every layer that you look at. Right, today you can write with a bit of spit or blood. You can write send off and find out if you're part Navajo, part Congo, part whoever. Cordovero would say that's great. Do that, and then you'll understand the genealogy of where you're coming from. But there are other social ramifications to this. When we think about our families, when we think about our neighbors, this teaching of Cordovero is saying you live on a certain street for a reason. When your neighbor upsets you or you upset your neighbor or there's something you got to fix, he says that's old news. This is the social aspect of reincarnation, not just the knowledge that the distinguished other and I have a history, but the ramifications that we're meant to work on something. Just like Cain and Abel had to fix their mess through Moses and Jethro. So what do we have to fix? Right? You have a certain spouse. There are certain things that come up, certain issues that always reappear. There's a reason for that. There are issues that appear in your community. Cordovero says there's a reason for that. You got to pay attention. You got to think about that. Now, this is beautiful. Everyone knows. So I'm bringing one more source from Tzfat. This is Rabbi Shimon Shlomo Alkabetz. He writes the famous Lecha Dodi song that we sing on Shabbos. And so he writes, he's also a Kabbalist. The whole song of Lecha Dodi is a Kabbalistic homage to the Shekhinah, to the feminine aspect of the Godhead. And he says the following: know that the souls are in the likeness of families. So, and this is gorgeous. This is like, you know how a baby's born, and the first thing everyone does is says, who does the baby look like? Al-Kabetz is telling you. He's saying, don't try and think is the baby looking like the mother, the father, the in-laws. He says, it goes way back. It goes way, way back. There's a reason. if you know, I have a. It's funny. So I know what my parents look like. Thank God. I know what their parents look like because there are photos. I never met my Zeta, but I have photos of my Zeta. But I don't have photos of my Zeta's father or mother. So beyond 3 generations, I'm lost. Now it's troublesome to me. It's troublesome for everyone. You know, this natural disconnect. You wish you knew more. You wish you knew what, you know, you learn so much from your parents. You learn so much from their parents through them. And then now for me, we're going way back, but think of my father. My father simply never knew what his grandfather or grandmother looked like. Nothing. Now, when you think of that, and you think of an age before photography, this is a very powerful teaching. Rabbi Shlomo Alkabetz is saying, you look at the baby, you're looking at your great-grandmother and great-grandfather. That's them. The likeness of their image. Right? This is a very powerful idea, which again, we're constantly trying to connect to the social ramifications. What does this mean? So before we come to conclude, I'm going to tell you a story because I want to see how this kind of then jumps in Hasidic times. So this was 16th century. Now what happens if we go to the 18th century? The Baal Shem Tov, Hasidut. So I'm going to tell you a story. So once upon a time, the Baal Shem Tov, he's in this town, you know, he always goes on these walks. He's in his DeLorean, and the DeLorean's brought into some village, and he sees this woman, and she's holding the hand of her boy. And he looks at the boy, and he says to the mom, what do you reckon for a few gold coins? Let me raise the boy. I'm the Baal Shem Tov. I'll raise him for you. I'll raise him, I'll take care of him. That's the only boy she's got. She says, no, not going to happen. I'll double it. Forget about it. So Baal Shem Tov doesn't know what to do. He notices that the mom and the boy, they go into this little inn. So he goes to the owner of the inn and he says, look, you know, he tells him the story. I'm the Baal Shem Tov. He says, oh, wow. And he says, look, I tried to convince the mom, give me the boy. I'll teach him. Try and convince her, talk to her heart. This is what the Baal Shem Tov says to the innkeeper. So the innkeeper goes to the mom and he says to her, look, it's I heard what happened. It's really worth your while. It's the Baal Shem Tov. He's going to give you a lot of money. And she says, no, it's simply not going to happen. And the innkeeper understands there's no way it's going to happen. So he gets very upset and he kicks her and the boy out of the inn. Now it's winter, there's a storm, there's snow. So the mom, the boy, they're shivering outside. She's bitter cold, doesn't know what to do. She's, fears for her son. So she thinks, well, maybe I should give the Baal Shem Tov my boy. He'll take care of him. So she goes to the Baal Shem Tov. She gives him his boy. He gives her many gold coins. The boy grows up with the Baal Shem Tov, and he becomes his prized pupil. He grasps everything. He's a real Eloi, as we say. He's this, child prodigy, and all of the, all the rich folk around Mezhibush, they all want, their daughters to marry in with this prized pupil, this child prodigy. But the Baal Shem Tov won't have it. One day, he sends his messenger, and he says, look, I want you to go to so-and-so village, and I want you to look for so-and-so, and give him this letter. So the messenger goes off, and he goes to so-and-so village, and he asks, like the rich guy in town, he gathers everyone. Does anyone know so-and-so? No one knows him. No one's heard of him. But then one of the servants of the rich guy says, oh, I know that guy. I know, he sells onions. He comes here once a week. He's here. Don't worry. He'll be here tomorrow. You don't have to go after him. He'll be here tomorrow. You can talk to him. And lo and behold, tomorrow, the next day, the onion seller comes And the messenger of the Baal Shem Tov says, are you so-and-so? He says, yes. And do you have such and such a daughter? He says, yes. He says, I have a letter for you from the Baal Shem Tov. The guy says, it's great you have a letter. I don't know how to read. So he says, okay, I'll read it for you. And basically the Baal Shem Tov says, you, the son of so-and-so and this and that, you have a daughter, she's called so-and-so. Yes, he does. What do you reckon? I've got this boy I've been raising. He's a child prodigy. Marry your daughter. Have your daughter marry him. And if you don't have enough money for a dowry, if you don't have enough money for a wedding dress, don't have enough money for the wedding, it's on me. If you don't have enough money for your other kids, it's on me. The onion seller thinks, great, I've just won the lottery. Sure, where do I sign? Signs, they get married, everything's great. And this boy, and this girl are having a lovely life, and all of a sudden, I want to read the exact words because this is beautiful. One moment, I want to find it. I want to translate for you the exact words. Notice so far that we had the innkeeper that made a decision to kick the woman and child out. So free will is in this story. And notice that the father of the daughter could have said no, but he said yes. I'm just throwing in a few things so far, assuming you're following. So they get married. And then the couple come to, all of the rich folk that wanted to marry their daughters to the Baal Shem Tov, they know the Baal Shem Tov has a reason, but he says, please, you have to explain to us what's going on here. Like, there's a social order, there's a social hierarchy, and you've just taken a nobody that, you've raised your child prodigy and you've given to the daughter of nobody. What's going on here? And the Baal Shem Tov says, this child and this woman, they were stuck together in a previous reincarnation, and I couldn't accept the fact that they would be detached this time round. They say, with all due respect, what does that mean? I'll tell you. Because once upon a time there was a king. Notice we have here a story within a story within a story. Once upon a time there was a king. And this king has this son that, could grasp anything. He was a child prodigy and a non-Jewish king. And the son of the king had a really good mate that was a Jew. And this Jew boy would learn from his rabbi. And so by the by, the son of the king also learned. And he learned so much Torah that one day he says, I want to be a Jew. But he says to his friend, I don't know what to do. My father, he's not Jewish. He won't have it. What do I do? And so the rabbi says, listen, go to this and this town far away. Tell your father you want to learn the kingdom. He'll let you. Go to this faraway land. And when you get there, there's a certain rabbi there. He'll help you. And he goes to the certain rabbi. The rabbi, makes him a Jew. He does giur. And he's living quietly this life as a Jew. He's happy. One day, in this God-forsaken town, a duke comes. A very wealthy duke comes. He comes with all this gold and silver. And according to the story, he's got this fascinating contraption. He's got this little box that's this state-of-the-art technology. And he knows already the drill. He knows that whenever he comes and everyone is, around, these simple folk, they're just interested in the gold and silver. But he notices this one guy, the king's boy that's now converted, that is fascinated by this one contraption, fascinated by this one box. And so he summons him because he says to him, you're no regular person. Tell me who you are. And the boy panics. He doesn't know what to do. He says, tell me now who you are. I'm the son of the king, but please don't tell him. He says, your sacred's safe with me. And he says, what are you doing here? He says, I converted, I'm a Jew. The duke says, marry my daughter. What do you mean marry my daughter? He says, I'm also a Jew. I escaped. marry my daughter. The couple get married. And this child, this convert, has become a shtickle kabbalist. And long story short, he has one condition to marry the Duke's daughter. He says, I'll marry her, but you have to promise me that no matter what happens to me, sometimes I have this ascent of the soul. Sometimes I go up to the heavens. If that happens, she can't touch me. The Duke says, fine. They get married. They're happily married. And this happens. He has the ascent of the soul. He goes up. When this happens, he looks like he's passed out. One day, he looks like he's almost dead. The daughter, the wife gets worried. She calls the doctors. They say he's alive. Don't worry. A day goes by. He wakes up. And she says, what happened? What happened? He says, this time I was able to climb my soul so far up to the highest chamber in the Garden of Eden. But they told me I can't climb any further because I'm a convert. And if I want to climb to the highest chamber, I need to die. I need to be reincarnated into the womb of a Jewish mother. And then I'll be able to come again, and I'll be able to ascend to the highest chambers. And so as this is happening, this mensch, this beautiful husband, what does he say to them up in the heavens? He says, on one condition, I got to ask my wife. They say, so long as she can come with me. He goes down, tells his wife, and she says, you're promising me that you die, I die, but in our next life, we get married together. He says, I promise you. That's what they told me. Shake on it. That's how the story goes. They shake on it. They both die. And the Baal Shem Tov says, and this is why I had to bring them together. Because the son of the king was reincarnated as the boy of that mum that didn't want to give me her son. And the daughter of the Duke was the daughter of that simple Jew, that onion seller. Now, why am I telling you all of this story? How does this, because you see how by the 18th and 19th centuries, all of a sudden Jews are sometimes wondering, why do you marry a certain person? Why are you with a certain person? And Hasidic teachings get into this whole genealogy of background stories of why this happened, how this happened, potentially what you need to be fixing. Now, I know we don't have time for this, so I'm not going to get into this, but I will just end on this one note. Because what we've seen here is this fascinating social aspect of reincarnation that begins in the 13th century, shifts to the 16th century, and moves on to the Hasidic times, where all of a sudden what begins as an idea to do with the everlasting soul, the soul that needs to be purified and refined so it can get back to the Garden of Eden, becomes the very meaning for why we marry who we marry, why our kids, friends, neighbors, community, the country we live in, the state we live in, is where we are. Because it's part of an old fix. And the deeper we look at someone, the more profoundly we try and understand ourselves, try and do tshuva. What does it mean to return to ourselves? To return to the branch in the Garden of Eden, together socially, where we all come from. So this means we don't only need to come back together as a nuclear family, but it's as a street, as a city, as a community. And I want to just add in one more thing. What do you have in your gardens? You have trees. Some of you have pets. I'm sure you all have, disposable plastic bottles. Are these not souls? The very same kabbalists that advocated this tree of life as a social tree were the very same kabbalists that said, that tree in your backyard, that is not only a soul of a person, but it feels, because it's punished, it knows. So the final ecological, environmental angle to our social aspect of reincarnation is that even the tree in your backyard and the table that you bought is part of your nuclear tree of life. And this comes to teach us not only that we need to take care of each other and wonder what we need to fix, but this also creeps into the realms of the inanimate, flora, fauna, and it adds profound meaning to everything that we do and every interaction that we have. So this is the talk. This is the spiel. I know it's a lot to take in, but so so if there are questions, if there are thoughts, if there are complaints, feel free by all means. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's very, very interesting. And yeah, we have a couple minutes left. If anyone would like to ask a question, make a comment, please feel free to raise your hands. And I see Lauren's hand is up. So let's go to Lauren, please.
Yes, Lauren.
And I'm not being sarcastic, and I'm really curious. So when you marry, obviously the wrong person, you get divorced. Does that mean that later your two souls have to meet again until you finally get along? Not that I'm saying this like in dread, because hopefully he wouldn't be like he was then.
No, that's a fascinating question. So, okay, so here's something interesting. So in the Talmud, right, text compiled 2,000 years ago, we have two scenarios for marriage. The Talmud teaches that your first marriage is determined by a divine call. There's like this divine, microphone, megaphone, that 40 days before you're born shouts out, so-and-so will marry so-and-so. That's the first marriage. The first marriage is determined by that heavenly microphone, 40 days before we're born. Your second marriage, the Talmud says, is based on our deeds. Now, when you think about it, like, for a moment, that makes a lot of sense. But then when you delve deeper into it, I didn't understand the difference between the two. Because when you tell me that that there's this heavenly declaration that 40 days before we're born, our soul will, be married to someone else, what determines that declaration? Is that chance? Is that previous reincarnations that the Talmud's not talking about, implying there is karma, implying there are already, merits and, pluses and minuses going on beforehand, and it's a continuation. So your question is fascinating, because what is meant to happen, and one thing is for sure, according to these teachings, the idea is nothing is by chance. And if there's someone that comes into our life, they are part of that tree and they are part of that intimate branch. What their purpose is and what we're meant to be doing, that's the soul-searching purpose of our life. So, and the same thing if it was you or someone else that mentioned, cats. So here I just have to add in a caveat. So I have to add in a caveat that's, according to these kabbalistic teachings, that's not always the case, meaning you will have, an instance where that is the case. You'll have another instance where, it's someone else or something else. But the assumption is that once these same teachings are telling us about the nuclear family, the community, and these same teachings are talking about the souls that can feel they're reincarnated into, the tree in your backyard or your cat, then that all of a sudden makes you wonder, okay, so what's going on here?
I actually had a cat that was exceptionally bright, and I swear this cat had a sense of humor, and I believed that she was a reincarnation of a very good friend who never committed suicide. But there was something about that cat that so reminded me of her, and I think she had to come back to be loved. Anyways, Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for sharing that.
Good. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to learn with you. And thank you all for joining. Wishing everyone a Gmar Chatima Tova.
Gmar Chatima Tova, everyone.
Thanks again. Have a good day, everyone.